Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Now that it is almost June, things here on the farm are getting quite busy. There's always the garden to keep up with, and we've started harvesting our first vegetables. And of course, there's always the animals to take care of too. There's always cheese to make, not to mention the meals that need to be made. There's the yard to keep up with. It's just a very busy time of year here on the homestead. In spite of all the busyness, I somehow found time to film and edit this week's YouTube video. This week's YouTube video is all about comfrey. Comfrey is a beautiful plant that I have growing all over on the homestead from a root that my mom gave me from the home farm. I posted a little bit something about comfrey on my Instagram, got a lot of questions on different ways to use comfrey, so that's what inspired me about today's video. And of course my grandma, who is always one of my biggest inspirations. She grew a comfrey plant and she would use it many different ways. And the thing about comfrey is that its roots go down into the ground like 8 to 10 feet. So it has access to some nutrients that a lot of other plants don't have access to. So today I am going to show you some of the ways that we use comfrey. Because the roots of the comfrey plant go down so deep, 8 to 10 feet, once you have a comfrey plant, you'll have it forever. You cannot get rid of it. So wherever you put it, make sure that you want it there, because you can try and dig it out all you want, but you can't get rid of it, because we did some backfilling around our house and we buried I thought I dug it out, and we buried it with, clay and fill. And don't you think, about 2 years later, there comes that comfrey plant that I thought was buried under about 10 feet of soil. Took it 2 years, but it came. And so now I'm battling a comfrey plant up in front of the house, but it's okay. We will use it, and it's just fine right there. So things have been crazy around the homestead here, which is normal for this time of year. We got the garden, we got all the milk to take care of, and things like this just make me slow down and appreciate everything around me. So this is what we're going to use to make a comfrey lotion. Comfrey is known to be very anti-aging and reduce the fine lines and wrinkles that we get from, leading a stressful life, just general aging. So I'm going to show a couple of the different ways that we use comfrey, and we don't nearly use the entire plant because we have a bunch of different plants growing. And they make a very good addition to your pollinating garden, because they really attract the pollinators. These little purple flowers do. So you could put them in your pollinator garden, but just don't plan to get rid of them. So normally when I want to infuse some herbs into some oil, I will just use some oil and let it set for 4 to 6 weeks, but we're going to be out of lotion before 4 to 6 weeks, so I'm going to hurry up this process a little bit. So one of the ways I'm going to do that is I'm going to chop up the leaves so that they have more surface area available to the oil. So now that I have some comfrey in there, I'm going to use my liquid oil, which today I am using some jojoba oil because that is great for the skin as well. And I'm just gonna cover all of this comfrey with this jojoba oil. So normally this is what you would let set for 4 to 6 weeks and infuse it. But I'm gonna hurry up the process for the sake of the video, and I'm gonna put this in a crock pot on low for 24 hours. So inside the house, we've got bread dough rising. We have some yogurt in the Instapot. And right here, we have our crock pot, and I've got some water in there, and the crock pot is on low, and we're just gonna let that set in the crock pot for 24 hours, and that's how we're gonna infuse the comfrey into the jojoba oil. Okay, it has been 24 hours since I started infusing this comfrey into the jojoba oil, and we are going to strain it. I've got a tiny little square of some sheer fabric, and I am just going to squeeze all the oil out that I possibly can get out of this comfrey. The comfrey has turned our jojoba oil into a green oil. Okay, we have a lot going on here this morning. I've got some cheese in the pot, and because I don't have a double boiler, I just have some water in a pot, and then I have this little glass dish. And what I need to make my lotion is 1 cup of tallow. So there, I've got our own pasture-raised tallow. Here, Harrison, I'll put that back there for you. And then I need 1/4 cup of this beautiful green comfrey infused jojoba oil. And you can use any kind of oil here. You can use any kind of liquid oil. You can use avocado oil or olive oil, but jojoba oil is my favorite to use. Now we're just gonna let that heat until it all melts together. So now that this is all melted together, we're gonna remove it from the heat. And we're gonna let it rest in the refrigerator until it's the consistency of a soft jello. I usually check it after about 2 hours, but 3 to 5 hours is more the time frame to expect. Okay, so I've got this from the refrigerator. It's a little more solid than I would normally let it get in the refrigerator, but I was busy making cheese and I could not stop and do something else before I had my cheese in the press. So next thing we're going to do is we're just going to add it to the blender and blend it up really well, and then we'll have our comfrey lotion. You could actually use the cream just like this, and your skin would absorb it just the same. But I like to whip it up just because it's a little more like the lotion that the family was accustomed to if I whip it up. So one of the other things that I like to add for extra nutrition is a little bit of vitamin E oil. So I'll add probably about a tablespoon of this to each batch. Okay, so this is whipped up pretty nice, and it gets liquid when it is whipped, but you can tell from my last batch of lotion that it sets up really well once it cools all the way. And we don't refrigerate this, it just sits on our bathroom counter, and that is how we will use it. So I'm just gonna add this in here. Okay, now remember, when you are making this lotion, the only thing that you really need to stick to get this consistency is 1 cup of tallow and 1/4 a cup of liquid oil. Everything else is optional. So you can infuse any herbs or medicinal plants in that 1/4 cup of liquid oil, like avocado oil or jojoba oil or grapeseed oil. You could infuse lavender or calendula. You could infuse any of those into that oil and then use it to make your lotion. Now, because Comfrey is such a controversial herb, and a lot of herbalists recommend to use it internally for only short periods of time. My grandma used it for her arthritis or anytime she had inflammation, but very likely she only used it for a couple days at a time. Applying it topically does not concern me at all. But even if it would, this lotion at this time of year will only last us about a month, and then I'll make a fresh batch, and by that time I'll have different plants to infuse into my oil. So this will just sit right there on our bathroom counter, and we will use it anywhere where we have dry skin, or on our face, or to soothe sunburns. Okay, now that we've got the lotion done, we're going to move on, and I'm going to show some of the other ways that we use the Comfrey plant. I'm going to chop off the top 5 to 10 inches of the Comfrey plant. And the Comfrey plant's very vigorous, and it'll grow this tall and taller numerous times this summer. So I'm taking off all the tender new growth. Okay, so we picked the top part, the most tender leaves of the Comfrey, and what we're going to do now is dehydrate them. Part of the dehydrated leaves we're going to save for winter, in case we need some for winter. And the other part of the leaves, other half of the leaves, we are going to use to make an oil, an infused Comfrey oil to use later on this summer. So we do not want to do our solar infused Comfrey oil. We'll just do what I did with that little pint jar earlier in the video. But we're going to use a quart jar, we're going to use more oil, and we're going to set it in the sun for 4 to 6 weeks, and that will be a solar infused Comfrey oil. And we do not want the blossoms for that, because the blossoms contain moisture that could cause your infused oil to mold. And that is also part of the reason why we're dehydrating them. So I'll dehydrate these for probably a day or half a day, and then I'll use them to make my infused oil, and that way all the moisture, excess moisture, is gone from the leaves, and I won't have as high of a risk of my oil becoming moldy. So we're gonna dry some of these to just get the moisture out of them a little bit, and then we're gonna start our infused oil, and the rest of them we'll just save for winter. Okay, now that we've used up the top part of the plant, the most tender parts, for our oil infusions and for dehydrating, we're going to chop the plant down even further, and we're going to take it down to about 6 inches above the ground. And these leaves are more coarse and don't infuse as well, but I'm going to show you a great trick on using this part of the plant. Using the coarser leaves and stems of the comfrey plant as a weed barrier and compost at the same time is one of my favorite things to do with the comfrey plant. So I just layer these stems and leaves around the bases of all of our young trees, and this creates a weed barrier, and as the leaves compost, they add nutrients to the soil. Using the comfrey as a weed barrier also saves my trees because it means that the grass doesn't grow as close to the trunk of the tree, which also means the boys stay further away from the tree with their lawnmower. I've seen where some people grow their comfrey plants right at the base of their fruit trees, and then they just, mow them off with the weed whacker and let it all lay right at the base of their fruit trees, which I think is a great idea. And I may plant some comfrey under our fruit trees here. Okay, the very last thing that I'm going to show you that we do with our comfrey plant is I break it up and put it into a 5-gallon bucket to make a comfrey compost tea for my plants. And here again, when we do this, we are extracting the nutrients that the comfrey is getting from deep under the topsoil. Once we've got our bucket about 3/4 of the way full with comfrey leaves and stems, we're going to fill the bucket the rest of the way with water. And then we're going to cover it, and I like to set my bucket of compost tea in a place where it gets part sun and part shade. After about a month, your compost tea will be ready to use, and then I diluted about half compost tea and half water before fertilizing my plants with it. This particular compost is one that I started last fall, so it is very dark, and I will be using it about 1 gallon of compost tea to about 4 gallons of water. We've started some young pine trees along the road, and I'm giving them each about a quart of compost tea, and then my veggie plants, I give them only about a cup of compost tea. And there you have it, folks, all the different ways that we use the comfrey plants here on the homestead. And I hope that you have enjoyed learning about them. Until next time, we will be right here doing all the chores, the gardening, and taking care of our little corner of land here in Iowa. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave suggestions for future videos and any positive comments in the comments section.